You're extremely knowledgeable about energy issues.
Okay, well, I'll just start, and then this is an open conversation, and it's exciting for us to be here. I speak with Marianne on this. We we feed off our constituents and the energy and the excitement for ideas, and um, I'm a very passionate legislator when it comes to energy and renewable energy and all the things we're going to talk about this morning. Mostly because, as I tell my kids, walk on the sunny side. I mean, to me, this is a happy conversation. I mean, we're in a fortunate place. I'll say that 40 years ago, I worked for one of the first photovoltaic solar electric technology manufacturers in the United States. It was owned by a big oil company. Its name was SolarX. And back in the day, we manufactured very large panels like you see them today on houses, but most of them were being sent overseas for water, to pump water and to help. You'll hear little beeps. Sorry, Mike. I don't know how to turn that off. And other types of international type applications. And today, here we are. Solar and wind and things we're going to talk about are very, very viable economically right here, right now. So that's a big excitement, and it hasn't always been that way. So in a lifetime, literally in a lifetime, it's come full circle, and here we are. Having said that, it's also about other things. My focus now is on emissions and our decarbonization that has to happen, climate change and whatnot. And so I think I'm going to give Marianne time to introduce herself, but let me just say that I think that there's a ton of heavy lifting to do. We are in a situation that we'll talk about this morning where the new administration for state government has swung a different direction, perhaps. There's still some opportunity to talk about some stuff, but Marianne and I are working very hard to try and figure out what the tea leaves, how to read these tea leaves, and what are the prospects for getting something done this next session. But as you'll hear, we have a ton of ideas, and we're going to be bringing many bills. Whether or not they have an opportunity to see the light of day is a whole nother question, and we can dig into that this morning. But I will say that, in my view, we are right on the cusp in Montana to a very significant transformation that'll be economically driven, but that will satisfy the values that we care about a clean and healthy planet and clean and healthy populace and critters and water and air. And I'm very committed to that. So I don't know, Marianne, I don't know if that's much of an introduction, but why don't you have at it?
Okay, no, great, thank you. Well, thanks very, very much for inviting us. Like Chris said, it's an honor. I was sitting here trying to remember, when I started becoming interested in the environmental issues. I guess when I was in high school, I read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, or maybe it was junior high, but it was a long time ago. And then I remember being a coordinator for our high school part of the very first Earth Day celebration. And gosh, we got a lot of federal laws passed, clean air and water, so many things, the EPA, but it seems like we're still fighting. And it's, 50 some years later, but we must persist. So, and all of this is moving into the session. Chris mentioned we have a lot of good bills that I want to talk to you about. The Rules Committee over the past couple of days. Some of those bills may be killed before they even have a hearing. There were so many bad proposals in the Rules Committee. Chris, I know you're traveling, so you probably weren't able to track them, but for one thing, they started with the joint rules committee, and the rules committee is meeting and will continue to meet next week to determine what session protocol process, what session will look like. I've been advocating for an all remote, or just to swear in remote and then postpone until a vaccination program is well underway. But um, I don't run the world, and certainly not the legislature. I'm in the minority. So um, while I'm not in the rules committees, I fortunately had the ability to watch them and engage via Zoom and attempt to give public comment. A couple of things that happened during the rules committee. Yesterday morning, the Senate House Joint Rules Committee voted against allowing public participation. Now, it was just for that morning session. I think, however, it's a sign of things to come. They, didn't want to deal with, the the messy constituent, comments. We don't want to deal with them, and that's not okay. That's a clear violation of the Montana's Constitution, Article 2, Section 8 and 9 for public participation and public right to know. They also, at the House Rules Committee yesterday afternoon, they did have a brief period of public comment, but I was shut down and ruled out of order because I was trying to relay a constituent's concern about COVID and safety and ability to make policy safely. Yet there was a double standard. The representative right after me, who was giving public comment, was allowed to continue on and on and on about her constituents' concerns. So, and the other thing, the very bad thing that happened yesterday, a couple of things, but instead of asking us to limit ourselves to 5 bills or so, 4 or 5 bills, which I would be fine with, given we have this raging, wretched pandemic. Instead of that, they're going to have the majority leadership, which is Republican, choose which bills get a hearing even. So which bills could even be introduced. So what that does, that not only, that's actually, that's not a democratic process. That's not democratic representation. We're all elected by the voters, and there's democratic representation. It happens to be there's 33 Democrats and 67 Republicans in the House. So that's what the electorate decided. However, we still deserve to have that 33 Democrats represented and an ability to decide what bills we bring forward, not our bills killed before they even get out the starting gate, even have a hearing. So my concern is that some of the environmental bills won't even see the light of day. And the other thing, Chris alluded to this, any of the bills we do bring, I do believe we have to put them in an economic frame. We know renewable energy is much more cost-effective, economic now, and it's going to get even better. So that's going to be extremely important to do that. I know there's news about the climate and climate crisis everywhere we turn. Just yesterday, the climate report came out, the Climate Change and Human Health in Montana report that was a collaboration of some university organizations and the Montana Health Professionals for a Healthy Environment. There's all of this science everywhere coming out. Sadly, the party in the majority doesn't seem to consider that. So you know, I could get into the bills that I want to bring and have put in for, and I will if you want to know. Um, my thinking is that if that amendment about having the Republicans pick and choose what bills even get heard, none of my bills will get heard. So the other thing, it disenfranchises the public. You will want to comment on some of those bills. You will want your voice heard. So this silences your voices, and that's not okay. So I'm not going to keep going on and on. We could open it up for questions and discussion. And again, good to be here. Now more than ever. Oh. Chris, I think you're muted.
Am I good?
Yeah, good.
Okay, I'm sorry. Pardon me. I was going to say, Marianne and I have been working on a legislative new energy economy workshop group over this, starting at the end of the summer. And maybe, Marianne, we could describe a little bit of that, just to give some framework for the kind of ideas that seem to be coming forward right about now. We are working with a group called the Regulatory Assistance Project. They call themselves RAP, and they're wonderful. They're out of Vermont, and working with RAP and about, I want to say 8 or 9 legislators. We've come up with a template, and it might be helpful to speak about that template just for a second and give you all a sense about, we've been just working hard and losing the battle on things like net metering and community solar energy and, a variety of things that are sort of as homeowners and as consumers of energy with Northwestern Energy principally have been on the front lines, the things we really cared about and we have been fighting for. But as we see the transition away from coal, which is another fight, by the way, and we can talk about that this morning as well in the legislature. I'm afraid to even think about it. Marianne and I have ding marks all over our foreheads to, kill the coal bills and whatnot, and so far successfully. But so the new template about decarbonization has a lot to do with a modernized grid. And because I think we've worked very hard to try and create a framework for going forward, rather than just a la carte issues that come up as we start talking about energy stuff. And so this idea is that the future grid is the energy marketplace. And there's something called beneficial electrification. This is brought by this organization called RAP. They have this term, beneficial electrification. Back in the day when I was little, so it's going back a fair bit, we wouldn't heat a house with electricity if we could. We still do, but we wouldn't choose to because it's very expensive to do so back in 1970, say. Today, electricity, the cost of the next electron, the marginal cost of electricity is so low that folks who think about this 24/7, the policy wonks, call it, are starting to talk about beneficial electrification, where we can use solar power now to heat water and to heat our homes and to heat buildings and to run our automobiles, because the cost of that next electron is so low. And that's a starting point that only needs one other very important piece, and that is a way to get those electrons to the various needs that we have. And so that's the grid. And so a modernized grid, and we're talking about utility scale conversations here. It's not really a question about whether you might want to put some solar on your house. That's a very important decision, and it's a good one. But for policy reasons, Marianne and I are trying to solve what are the big obstacles that are keeping us from that renewables future and what are the things that we can do as policymakers, as lawmakers, to create the opportunity for this whole future to come. And it would be driven by the economy, and where it's not driven by the economy, Marianne and I are prepared. I'm not sure we're going to be terribly successful at it, to bring serious conversations about the social costs of energy, externalities and whatnot. And those are just as important. They're hard in Montana to talk about. So in the Gianforte administration, it's all going to be about jobs and new industry and whatnot. So I was just going to mention that we have this wonderful climate solutions report that came from the governor's desk. And it was a wonderful, I think 45 people worked on it, and they're all very esteemed and very thoughtful document. And if you haven't had a chance to read it, it's got some wonderful discussions, not only about renewable energy, but water quality and all kinds of other issues as well. But from that document, there's some sort of pre-steps. One is that we're going to move to regionalization. So with a modern grid, we'll move to a regional energy economy, call it. So we might be, fun fact, our wind energy in Montana blows on average, it blows all the time, as we all know, but it's seen as blowing in the afternoon at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, mid-afternoon, which is perfect for the West Coast. Whereas the West Coast in the Columbia River Gorge, their wind blows, and I couldn't tell you why, at 2 in the morning. Maybe it's the 2 in the morning wind gets to us by 2 in the afternoon. I don't know. But there's some scenario there where if we use their wind at 2 in the morning to charge our electric vehicles, and they use our wind at 2 in the afternoon to heat their water and their buildings and whatnot, you start seeing the opportunities for regionalism. So we have that, and then we basically are looking at the grid as being the future marketplace for energy. So you have a group that thinks they can produce energy and be competitive and welcome to the grid. And then you have demand side management, which is when there was a wonderful article yesterday. And if anybody wants these things, Mary and we can figure out how to get them to you. There's a great story yesterday that a company down in Southern California has corralled 1,000 homes on the smart grid. So they have smart meters and a smart grid, and with the internet. So there's houses, pretend it was in Montana. There's a house in Havre, there's a house in Miles City, there's a house in Bozeman, there's a house in Helena, et cetera. And say there are 1,000 of them, and they create a virtual power plant from those homes, such that those homes might have solar on them and they're feeding energy into the grid in tiny little bits, but over 1,000 units or 5,000 units, it starts to add up. And then the utility can see that cyber aggregation of homes, both for production, but also for demand. And in the event of a really bad, moment where it's 110 degrees outside, they can call everybody and say, do you mind backing off your air conditioning just a tad? And we'll save some energy and be able to send it somewhere else where it's needed. So the future is really about coming together. It's about, and I wouldn't say this, massively publicly because it would be misunderstood, but it's socialism with a small s. It's the idea of public schools and having highways and whatnot. Our grid is an idea where we're all together, and we're together because it makes the whole, rising tide raises all boats and whatnot. It's the small s idea of working together. That's what the grid is. So I'll say one more thing, Marianne, and then maybe if you want to jump in, Marianne, on any of this. So we're going to be bringing bills, whether they're heard or not, to Marianne's point, which is just massively uncomfortable to talk about, but to modernize our grid. We're going to be bringing bills to modernize our grid. That bill has already been introduced or brought to be written up. There's going to be a bill to make sure that the smart meters that are going to be put on our homes in the next few years, these are little devices that talk on the internet and talk to the utility, and the utility can talk to you. And with a smart meter, you can get into time of use rates. You can get into something called demand side management, where your water heater will heat in at 2 in the morning when the rates are very low, and you'll save some money. It makes everything more efficient. We're going to bring a bill on efficiency, an energy efficiency standard for the state of Montana. We will have bills to reform the PSC. The PSC is in tough shape right about now, and I'll be bringing a bill to have an audit of the PSC, which is a top to bottom, just check in, Charlie, what's going on over there. We depend on the PSC. I'll be bringing a bill for a green bank. Now, again, I don't know whether any of these bills are going to see the light of day, but a green bank would would tie into a Joe Biden, Kamala Harris effort at the national level for a national green bank. And our green bank and green banks around the country will start to channel investment to renewable energy development and other types of development, energy efficiency. We always have to talk about the efficiency part when we're talking about energy, because it's just the right thing. And then I'm a big fan of electric vehicles, and I have half a dozen bills for electric vehicle charging stations. So I'll shut up, and Mary Ann, you can speak a little bit to this, but it's not just renewables, you guys. It's getting emissions out of the picture. It's decarbonization. And then we are at this wonderful place that we weren't in 1970, where these technologies can come in and solve the equation. And these are technologies that we want. So for the first time in modern history, these set of technologies are ready to do the heavy lift. They will compete perfectly against gas and coal. And I'd like to talk about natural gas before we finish this morning. So we have this lining up of the stars. What we don't have lining up with the stars in the state of Montana is a political reality that's going to be very painful, I'm afraid to say. And I hope I'm not, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. So, Mary Ann, why don't you talk about any of those things? But that's what Mary Ann and I have been working on since the end of August with a whole group of folks, and we're quite excited about that work.
Well, Chris, in this case, you hope you're wrong. I hope you break your trend of being right generally. Sadly, I think you're right. I liked where you talked about the shared benefit. Energy is a shared benefit, and we together need to work on moving it forward towards sustainable, renewable energy and beneficial use. One of the other bills, I don't know, Chris, did you mention the IRP, Integrated Resource Plan? That was one of the other bills coming out of this energy legislative work group with the Regulatory Assistance Project. And Mary McNally is going to carry that. That is putting some requirements on when Northwestern and utilities, Northwestern pretty much, submits its integrated resource proposal, energy plan, energy procurement plan to the PSC. Most of you will remember during the very recent Colstrip fight, the Colstrip acquisition of more of units, well, 4, I think, 3 and 4, whatever, more Colstrip. And the very day before Northwestern announced that they were going to try to acquire more of Colstrip, the coal-fired plant, the energy resource plan was released, and there was no mention about that acquisition. There was mention about natural gas fired plants, but nothing about more of Colstrip. And in fact, Northwestern denied and kept denying repeatedly for months leading up to this that there was any plan to do that. And on the record, and then the very next day. So this IRP bill would put some sideboards like that can't happen. You know, you have to be more transparent. And then there's a whole lot more about it. And maybe Chris, you could add to that. But you know, my other thought is in the whole big global picture, and you know, the climate crisis doesn't stop at our borders, obviously. In the whole big global picture, thank goodness, we have an incoming US administration, federal in the White House, that is going to prioritize climate. And that's a good thing. So, you know, Montana might be an outlier. I think in the big picture, things are looking up. Yeah, so you know, there are some other environmental bills out there that our work group, you know, didn't prioritize because we wanted to prioritize bills that actually had a chance. Of course, that was then. This is like today when we're seeing some of these rules that are being written, and I don't think anything has a chance, but can't go into session with that attitude, tell you. But some of the other bills that are being proposed, I know Andrea Olson is putting in increased renewable energy standard. And I'm putting in a bill that I carried last session just because I wanted to keep the conversation going on the social costs of carbon pollution and emissions. It's what I call the Montana Climate Action Act. It's a carbon cost community dividend, which would levy a $10 a ton fee on carbon for the top large industrial emitters. And that revenue would then go back to the communities, energy transition communities, to the tribes. We're putting another funding stream into some of the tribal nonprofits and tribal colleges for retraining. And the revenue generated would of course be less now than it would have been last session, before some of the owners of Colstrip bailed, rightly so. But they took the money with them and could have been paying a carbon cost. At the same time, we consumers have been paying this carbon cost for several years, and I won't get into that, but take my word for it, we are, and we're not getting our money's worth. Another bill that I'm going to be bringing is a coal replacement and fossil fuel worker retraining and transition bill that would, let's see here, levy a replacement tax on energy production. And it's a replacement tax for the loss in coal revenues. And we're experiencing quite a big reduction. And, you know, it is fair for everyone because folks with bigger homes, mansion type homes, who could probably afford the tax more to pay more will be paying more, and folks who are of low income with, you know, smaller residences would not be paying as much. And we can even work in a sliding scale low income base. But in the end, it's a savings because renewable energy is cheaper. So it works out that consumers will actually, in over time, but not such a long period of time, will actually be paying less than they would be paying if we're getting our energy from coal and other fossil fuels. That's probably never going to see the light of day, but and probably my Climate Action Act isn't either. But it's important to keep putting those forward and just to keep having our voices heard. That's why I'm so dismayed that the Republican president, and they'll be able to choose which bills even get heard. And that's killing a bill before the public even can weigh in. And I'm sure hoping there'll be some lawsuits, because that's a clear violation of our Constitution and First Amendment, frankly. I guess I just want to ask you to continue having your voices heard. We just really now more than ever need to speak up that, not everyone is lockstep and barrel with this kind of extreme conservative thinking. So, yeah, and I'd also like to hear some of your priorities and thoughts. So what do you think?
We had one question come through in the chat, and you kind of answered it already. But Jennifer Boyer asked, could you take a guess of what legislation bill might have the best chance of making it through, if there are any? I know before you said probably none of them would, but do we have a best hope?
I would think a grid mod would. I mean, that's economic. And, our new governor-elect has said that he's going to prioritize Montana business, Montana economy. I mean, what do you think, Chris?
I would absolutely agree. I think the idea is that we're going to be trying to invest in infrastructure and invest in this new energy economy. So there are these phrases that I think will resonate with a person who's built a bazillion-dollar software company, and knowing because Greg comes from Bozeman. Hi, Jan. Nice to see you. And so, I think that's a good starting point. I'll just pass on that some of the things I'm hearing, I don't know if they're fair or not, but we all are waiting to see what's going to happen here. That I know Greg Gianforte a little bit, and when you sit there and talk to him, he's a decent fellow. He's a Bozeman resident, has been for 30 years or 25 years, and what I'm hearing, and you just sort of put this in your back pocket and hold on, maybe someday it'll be helpful, is that Greg's not really interested apparently in hearing about issues of empathy and disharmony. I mean, in the society, he's not going to respond if someone says, well, this person's really having a hard time. I mean, I don't mean to make him sound like he has a completely cold heart. I don't know him that way, but he's not motivated that way in a policy sense. He's not a empathetic character. He's going to be interested, as we've heard him, in creating jobs. Mm-hmm. So how do you create jobs? You get a bunch of people in a room. He's going to say, I want to get all the obstacles out of the road. So, the regulation piece of it, clean air, clean water. I'm afraid that we're not going to be able to stop him from stripping environmental regulations, for example. That's a big concern I've got. But on the other side of that same equation, he's going to say, let's go do stuff. Well, the renewable energy industry, to a person, and I think Andrew was on this call a minute ago. There he is. The renewable energy industry is ready to go do stuff. I mean, 100% ready to go do stuff, and is prepared to, has the economy behind it. It has the workforce behind it. It's ready to grow that workforce. It has technology coming from all over the planet into Montana, the best storage technology. Battery storage technology, you guys, is dropping faster in cost than renewables are dropping in cost. Renewables are dropping in cost at light speed. Certainly compared to my 40-year experience, all of a sudden they went, and it costs a couple pennies to produce the next electron. Battery storage is dropping even faster. So if you were a natural gas company, you'd be a little bit concerned right about now because these costs are dropping out of the sky and it's very exciting. So our collective industry, which is a lot of different stuff. It's renewables, people making panels, it's people making battery storage and pump water storage. It's people developing those softwares that are going to drive this system on a modern grid. And it's going to say, okay, hey, that house over in Miles City, go ahead and put some more solar on the grid because we could use it there. And hey, take it off a little bit here. And we're going to ship our wind to Oregon in the next hour. All this stuff is going to be done on a computerized platform. And there's humongous things we can be doing to both improving the system, lowering consumer costs is going to be the key. I mean, we have to focus on that piece. It's about family economics and business economics. And Greg Gianforte is going to listen to that. I would also just mention, because of the opportunities in the industries that Andrew's working with, Bozeman is going to be bringing a bill to try and create some consumer choice for its citizens, working with the utility, such that if you are a consumer right now, we can put in for a little to buy green energy. They call it Green Plus, I think, or Energy Plus is this program for Northwestern Energy. And what Northwestern does is goes out and buys a piece of paper that says, we've sent some money to a wind producer on the West Coast mostly, but we're trying to get to a place where Bozeman's or Missoula or Helena is able to go to the utility and say, our 30,000 folks want to buy and get and receive actual electrons produced by wind or solar renewables. And so consumer choice is a whole nother area. This whole topic we're talking about is many levels deep and many levels wide, many miles wide. It's a very, very exciting topic, and it ties together a lot of different types of technology. I think Greg Gianforte, this is a natural for him. I mean, you get excited talking about it. I would expect he will. The one thing that's going to kind of ruin our party is if there's a push for more Colstrip, which I expect there will be. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing I'd love to talk about briefly, because it's not really the subject, but it runs right in parallel, is about natural gas. And the IRP, so the planning process at this point with Northwestern Energy historically has been an energy supply plan. Elsewhere in the country, a utility comes and they talk about efficiency. We're going to do all this stuff to make things more efficient and reduce your bills that way. We're going to do other things. We're going to do demand side management. We're going to have smart meters, all that, those conversations. But in Montana, we just talk about energy supply. And the reason is because of the bankruptcy that happened in 2002. And if anybody really wants to it's a fascinating story for anybody interested in energy, but it's also a quick way to get depressed. If you read about the bankruptcy that happened in this state, they were trying to do the right things. They were trying to create customer choice. They were trying to give us the opportunity to go out in the world and buy renewables if that's what we felt as a household. Didn't work. Enron was in the middle of it, and there was a bunch of sort of, people lying and cheating and stealing. And we lost our power company. And when they came back out of bankruptcy, all they were interested in doing was building their central plants. So they went out and they bought Colstrip Unit 4 for way too much money, by the way, and that's a whole nother subject. They also went out and bought the hydro plants, ostensibly for too much money as well. They paid, so we sold them to somebody else and then we bought them back for more money. I mean, Montana really had a really bad couple decades there here. And so our whole planning process is about how to buy more central plants. Well, we are not in the mode anymore buying big, massive gas plants. And I will say parenthetically that if you hear about a gas plant being suggested, which you will, because natural gas in theory is a transition fuel, because it's not as dirty as coal. But I will tell you right now that it's a 40-year commitment. And in 40 years from now, natural gas isn't going to be anywhere near being an idea, and it'll be way too expensive. The problem with natural gas in the state of Montana is that our natural gas system, the capacity of the pipelines right this minute, is just as challenged as the problems we're having with capacity electricity wise. In other words, our our electrical system is challenged 3 or 4 times a year to the point of almost a blackout. And so to bring natural gas in to fix that creates a whole nother set of tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars of problems to bring these pipelines in, to bring the sufficient amount of gas supplies to feed these big plants. Northwestern currently has a plan for 5 plants, 5 gas plants at $125 million, $150 million each. We're talking about $1 billion plan, and it's all natural gas. So to Mary Ann's point a minute ago, it's our Public Service Commission is what regulates this whole nuttiness. And that's where I think if you can find who it is that represents, there are 5 different commissioners and each one has a district. Find the district commissioner that represents your hometown and start to create a working relationship with that person. Because that's where the rubber meets the road. We are in deep trouble for the moment because the commission has been very dysfunctional. I'll be quiet now, but the point is that we have huge decisions coming, big time decisions coming. And I think that it's a real sort of interesting ideological battle between, say, the town of Helena wanting its consumers to have choice, whether if they want green power, then go for it. And providing them with the tools for that. And that's real. And we are going to work on that versus having a sort of 1950s style centralized monopoly utility telling everybody it's, today it's meat and potatoes and tomorrow it's meat and potatoes and the next day it's meat and potatoes. So sorry. And that, I hope the transition is very thoughtful and has a certain amount of decorum to it, because these transitions can be choppy water. And I think Mary Ann and I and our colleagues are committed to a path that doesn't hurt consumers and that creates education up front and creates a sense of what we're trying to actually get done, and that embraces the planet and not create something where people are falling off. Mary Ann, I applaud your thoughts on coal strip and on the retraining of coal workers. And, that I'm bringing a bill to create an energy corridor along the coal strip transmission line, which runs from coal strip all the way to Townsend, where 287 goes up to Helena. And along that strip, there will be incentives to tie into that transmission line with large renewable energy projects. So we have to just sort of, if we just turn a little bit, we're actually starting to do pretty well. All right, I'll shut up. An awful lot of things to talk about.
No, don't. I just love listening to you and your knowledge, your current knowledge, your knowledge of the historical evolution of Montana power. When you were talking about fossil fuels, I mean, the other thing is the pipelines. I mean, that's a chunk of change to build those things, and also degrades the environment, and which is not going to be good if they're going to try to chip away at some of our environmental protections. We've talked about offensive bills. I mean, we're also really going to need to be the loyal opposition and run a strong defense with all of the bad bills that are coming out. Chris, you mentioned Helena, you mentioned Bozeman. They want to bring bills that they can do more renewable, that kind of thing. But there is a mover front, and it'll probably be a bill that's chosen to move forward, to preempt local authority, and not let local governments and communities pass any ordinances or policies that are more restrictive or protective than any state laws. Well, if we have this bunch of folks who are chipping away at all of the protections, that's not good. So they want to chip away at the protections and then put a stop to any local community efforts to protect the environment. Some of the other bad bills, we know there's going to be a bill to chip away at NEPA, to repeal the bad actor law, to tax turbines more, just to put obstacle before obstacle in front of renewable companies to come to Montana. I mean, which we ought to just let the market make it, build it, and they will come. Modernize our grid, smart meters, fair taxation. If they want to tax turbines more, there's another bill to create a renewable energy trust. Well, that doesn't make sense to me. The more I thought about it, because our coal trust makes sense because we only have a finite amount of coal. We have an infinite amount of sun and wind, for now anyway. With the climate crisis, who knows what's going to happen in the future. But that was kind of a joke, sadly. And also, speaking of the trust, there's a bill to bust the trust again. And so, yeah, we're really going to have to be on the offensive, and that's where you can come in. Somebody asked a question in the chat about what our 2021 legislative session is going to look like. When is there going to be a final decision? We're all wondering that. We thought Monday and Tuesday would be the final. Here's what session's going to look like. Okay. It's going to be all remote, which in my dreams, or hybrid or delayed. But no, they're kicking the can till next week, and with an opportunity to put in some more bad amendments. I mean, as it is now, how they want to, majority wants to handle COVID is appoint a Republican-run majority panel to decide day by day how we're going to administer COVID precautions with respect to the legislature. Well, it's not a day-by-day thing. The incidences of COVID are spiking day by day, but we know we can predict. We have the science, so that's not a good thing. And then there was another question about, are there any Republicans who like renewable energy? My guess is yes, probably. I mean, they're smart people. They see the dollars and cents, and and even some of them see the social cost that's happening. Some of them are farmers and ranchers, for goodness sake. I mean, their whole crop system is upended. So the problem is if they can get past their leadership, and are they going to legislate lockstep and barrel behind their leadership, or are they going to break to do the right thing?
Right. I think, there's going to be a, oh, there's a question, sorry. You'd have to unmute yourself, I think. No.
Okay. I just, this is Robin from Arrow. Thank you guys. Very, very informative sharing. I think I know I speak for some of the membership at Arrow when I'm asked, the question I'm asking is, there is a strong interest in being able to support what, we all understand that there are all these unknowns. And, for things like, I agree with you with this concept of Gianforte being, attracted to technology and new visions and possibility of industrial choices that improve the economy
Mhm.
and bring jobs. So what could we, either as organizations or individuals, what do you imagine is the best way to demonstrate to him, and therefore from him to the legislators or vice versa, our support for any renewable energy projects such as this master grid program that you were talking about? How do we do that? What's the most effective way to be supportive, one, in that direction, and two, in the other direction of communicating a desire to defend, efforts to cut back on current legislation. So it feels like there's two avenues. I understand that there's chaos, but historically, has there been a resource for keeping updated on the legislative process, and avenues for communicating? Do those still apply? Like, how do we support to the best of your ability to know?
Chris, do you want to go or you want me to go?
Sure.
Or-
Well, I think it's a mix of things. Technically, there are ways in the next few weeks before things get started, where, we could identify some kind of a method to print out, to speak to the kind of bills and the cadence of those bills, the choreography, because a bill will come out and then it'll be put on hold, for 2 weeks or 2 months. In other words, it gets very complex and somewhat chaotic. And so, and all of us are running pretty hard, frankly. But I would certainly commit to some kind of a way to, in a routine manner, either in print or on a platform like this, to talk about the things that seem to be happening. I'm extremely concerned about this recommendation made yesterday by Matt Regier in the House to allow a committee chair to cut to the chase just because they don't like the subject. And, his comment was, look, we just need to streamline the process. Well, what he's talking about is cutting off half the state of Montana from things that they really care about and want to talk about. And so, we're all going to be in a very interesting moment here pretty quick, where we're either going to be trying to take a pragmatic, be reasonable, so stay sober, stay sort of in our seats mode over here on one side, and try to coax a more reasonable conversation out of the system on the one hand, and then we can communicate that process, Robin, to you and to others. Somehow we'll figure that out. The other side of this is just, we're going to leave a whole lot on the table. We already know that. And I'd say 3/4 of the bills that I've thought and I have in the system just getting started are probably never going to see the light of day this session if what happens has to do with a committee chair being able to kill a bill before any conversation about it. It just means that we're not going to get anything done. So, and then do we stand on our chairs and start screaming? I mean, at what point, are we expressing ourselves to those core values, which is how we got elected, and then balancing that off, because it's obvious that if you're stirring pots You're not going to have a lot of negotiating opportunity, probably. You know, when you're sitting in a committee trying to develop a relationship with somebody who you may not agree with on everything, but you're trying to set up a productive relationship with, if you're standing on a chair screaming to the heavens, that those two things sometimes don't go hand in hand. So I think we're all about to learn, you know, where is it that we need to be? And I think it's going to be, the tone will be set by the governor. And if the governor comes out and says, look, we're going to go build 3 more coal plants, or what, I'm totally making this up, then we know where we are and we know what we're going to have to do. And it's going to become much more of a 1960s kind of, you know, I mean, I think we're going to have to get into tuck position and really fight like in the trenches, versus if we can get them to agree to grid modernization and we get the economy open in the renewable sector to be able to do work. And, you know, maybe we're not prescribing it the way we would want to by state government to lead the way and be the leader. Okay, well, let the economy be the leader. And I think to Mary Ann's point a minute ago, there's enough data, and, you know, maybe Andrew wants to comment on this, that there's enough data that the economics will probably drive the deal, and we might be okay with that. So I'll shut up, but I'm committed to reporting out to the degree I can about, you know, Robin, to your question, how do you get involved? I think it's going to be through the PSC. Go find your district commissioner and try and figure out how to have a relationship with that person. It may not be easy, but try to figure that out, have a productive relationship. And we need to listen to them and understand what's going to move the meter for them. Everybody's got something that they care about, and we need to figure out who these folks who are now in power, like massively in power, what makes their day? What is it that they really care about? And then figure out if there's a way to share that concern, if they'll share some of our concerns, and work something in the middle. Anyway, Mary Ann.
Yeah, Chris is right on. You know, I was going to say, as far as, you know, what can you do and how can you keep up? You can link with other like-minded environmental groups and groups that have, you know, commonalities in following and tracking and responding, and also being proactive, as you know, in addition to being reactive. And Andrew has written in the chat, Andrew Valanis with the Montana Renewable Energy Association has written, you can follow Montana advocacy groups that are actively lobbying. They generally send out emails and post to social media about bill progress. And MREA is one of those. And, you know, so that's one way. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow Chris, I'm sure, on Twitter. You can friend me on Facebook and all of that. Although I have to tell you, I'm a little discouraged with Facebook. Yesterday, I posted a sort of a trail of things as rules was getting worse and worse and worse. With limiting public comment or denying public comment and passing these or you know, these amendments to you know, deny bills from seeing the light of day. Just, you know, really it's power corrupted is what I was seeing. So I posted some things on Facebook, and nothing outrageous, outlandish, or obscene or anything like that. And I had somebody report those posts to Facebook, and Facebook blocked me for a time until I had to go in and say, and clear it up. So, and also my Google account was, there was an attempt to breach my Google account. Google contacted me. So there are some of our detractors who will stop at nothing. I know that sounds pretty extreme, but I have no doubt. So there's that. But if there's strength in numbers, if one person rails against it, stands on a table and shouts, yeah, that's not going to do any good. There'll be gaslighted and all of that. But if masses of folks stand up and say, this is what Montana wants, and like Chris said, we don't want half of Montana to be disenfranchised from the process, which is what will happen. So link with groups, letters to the editor, send letters to the editor. If you're upset, put it in words and just shoot it off. We're not sure what public comments going to look like. I know during the interim, for interim committees, if you wanted to remotely provide public comment, you have to email the Legislative Services Division before 5 o'clock the day before, which is not really cool, but for session, but who knows what it's going to be. But that person would be Susan Fox. She's the division administrator, and her email is sfox, like the animal, @mt.gov. You can also go onto the law's website, and stop me if you know all of this, which is lag.mt.gov, and you can get there by click on session, 2021 session, and then bills, and there's actually a video there that can tell you how to maximize your use of this laws, which is bills tracking, and you can join interest groups and be sent an email. So there's a lot of things that you can do, I know, in your copious amount of spare time, right? That's the problem. We're all busy with our lives. And I don't have to say, we don't want to wake up one day saying, how did this happen? How did we lose our democracy? How did we lose our environment? How did we lose our future? We don't want that. As far as Greg Gianforte, there's I don't know, I might regret saying this, but there may be hope. I think he called all of the elected legislators. My phone rang a couple days after the election, maybe it was the next week, and the person said, "Hi, this is Greg Gianforte." I'm like, "Yeah, right." And I said, "Governor-elect?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm calling to congratulate you and see how you're doing." And I said, "Well, my gosh, I'm impressed. I was truly impressed that he reached out." And I told him I was impressed because he doesn't need me. He doesn't need the 33 Democrats in the House and the 19 in the Senate at all. And I said, so I told him some of my priorities. I told him mental health and living wage, and he kind of punted on the living wage, but we kind of connected on some mental health bills. In fact, I'm introducing a bill on something that he actually was a co-sponsor for in the Congress, and not environmental, but mental health, which is actually all connected. Our climate crisis, our pandemic is really taking a toll on our mental health, but I'm getting off track. He said, especially with the living wage, he said, "Well, read my Montana business plan." So I did. I went in and read it, and it was a lot for business, not much for the workers who drive business. But there's a way to engage with him. He said, "Call me anytime." So I did call him back to get him interested in this mental health bill, and he's going to help with it. So I think there's hope. He's going to look at renewables. I don't think he'll support more coal. I mean, he's a business person. He owns stocks. He knows what BlackRock is doing. He's an investor too. Some say he took advantage of some of the inside information, but I don't know that. But he's a business person. So, if we can frame this, that this is where the market's going, this is where our future's going, and it's good all around. It's good for our economy. It's going to be good for tourism. It's going to be good for public health. It's going to be good for productivity. It's just going to be good all around. I think he's willing to listen. Now, hopefully he's hiring his cabinet and his people who are also willing to listen. But I would say, what the heck, reach out to him. He does have a website. I think if you just Google Greg Gianforte or Montana Business Plan, start there. And if you need my help on it, not that I'm one of his favorite people, but we are connecting. So, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on that thought, which is don't lose hope. I mean, we're all going to be needing to talk to each other because it's not going to be an easy conversation and with the administration. But I think that there are going to be places where we think we can get some traction, and we need to find them. So I would encourage, and I think all of us hopefully would start with a sense of try and be productive and try and figure out, okay, let's do something together. And then maybe this session turns into something else later, but try and give it a chance. I wanted to respond to a chat. And by the way, I got the call from Gianforte as well. And, on paper, that's just a terrific starting point. He was gentle, and he was saying, look, let's work together. My door's open. That's what he said. And so Mary and I share the thought that for the moment, that was a moment of bright light. I wanted to respond to a chat question from Ann about who are the folks that we might want to talk to. And I just, on the House Energy Committee, which I've sat on now since 2015, there are several people that I want to just sort of note. Katie Zolnikoff is the wife of Daniel Zolnikoff, who just got off, and he was the chair of energy. So Katie is following behind him, and so it's all in the family there. And I don't know Katie well, but I think she will, as her husband, be a fairly moderate. She'll listen, and Daniel is still very interested in all these issues, and so there may be an opportunity there for us to work with Katie Zolnikoff on the House Energy Committee. I also want to say that Geraldine Custer, I believe Geraldine's from Rosebud County, and I think she's just a good human being. She'll listen. If someone was to call her up and say, look, do you have 3 minutes? I just want to share an idea or two with you. She would say, absolutely. And she doesn't have any sharp edges. She's a decent person, and might be somebody we can work with. Neil Durham on the House Energy Committee, same, he's second term. He's just getting started. He's starting to learn this, and Neil's a decent person. I think he's a former law officer, if I'm not mistaken. I also want to mention that Katie Sullivan from Missoula is a Democrat who's smart as a whip and a wonderful colleague of Marianne's and mine. And, I think that if you wanted to talk to somebody about energy stuff that might be coming up on the committee, Katie would be great. Denise Heyman is a colleague in Bozeman, and Denise is vice chair. So those are two people on that committee who are Democrats, who might be, well worth talking to or staying in touch with maybe, and say, look, do you mind if I call you every couple weeks or every month and have a quick check-in, Charlie? On the Senate side, it's a little harder for me to read it because I'm not there yet, but we have a fellow named Jason Small, who is a vice chair. the Energy Committee, just to give you an idea, the Energy Committee in the Senate side is seven Republicans and 4 Democrats. So you can see right off the bat. And I think it's 12 and 6 or 7 on the House side. We don't have the votes, you guys. We simply have no power here. And Dwayne Ankeny on the Senate side is the senator from Colstrip. And Dwayne is not a bad person, but he does his job very well to protect the coal interest, because that's his constituency. I'm not making apologies for him, but it's the reality of who he is and what he's doing. And I would just say that I'll be on that committee. And Mary McNally from Billings is a colleague who's a Democrat, but who, if you want to stay in touch with the committee and what it's doing and suggest things that need to happen, Mary's terrific. And Ryan Lynch and Mark Sweeney are both from Butte, and or Anaconda, and they're good folks. They're new to the committee. They don't have any, they're just green behind the ears and all that. And so I think it's Mary McNally and myself on the Senate side for the start anyway. And I'm, you can find my phone number, and you're most welcome, to call or text or email, and I'll do everything I can to stay in touch. We're very interested in the ideas, the response to things that are happening in the world. Everything that you can bring helps inform us as to what next steps can be. And that's my commitment. Anyway, I don't know if that's helpful. There are a couple people in each, on the House side and the Senate side, who you can talk to. And the Republican side on the House has some possibilities. On the Senate side, maybe not so much. Anyway.
I'll just chime in. Andrew had something that's a really good point when it gets really super busy, and now it's, with COVID, it's going to be the legislature on steroids and just kind of weird, but legislators are really busy, and if you could keep your point clear and direct and short, with maybe 3 bullets or something. Don't send 10 studies and 60-page reports. A summary is good. Yeah, because otherwise they won't have time to read it. Once session gets started, that's what I'm talking about. Not now. Now you can load them up.
Andrew, do you have anything you'd like to add to the discussion? I wanted to create space for you based on everything you've heard so far.
I really don't want to take away from Chris and Marianne, who are the experts and are 2 of our wonderful elected leaders. And I'm always happy to work with both of them.
I yield my time to Andrew.
Well, thank you, Marianne. If we're going to follow Robert's rules, I'll take that. No, I think, just from my perspective, I cannot speak from a legislative perspective, even as a lobbyist. I'm not the one up there pushing the button, but I did want to say, as a lobbyist, and a lot of what I do specifically with obviously MREA members, but also the general public, is try to coach them a little bit on lobbying. And that's why I kind of asked that question, because I think I had the opportunity to do very, very little lobbying as just a citizen in DC. And in Washington, DC, you walk into the Senate Hart building, and it's 9 floors, and you have to find the right office, and you're trying to meet with the right person, and you're actually trying not to meet with your elected representative because you want to meet with their energy expert or agriculture expert or whatever, who passes on the info. And it's so very different from the Montana legislature, where a lot of legislators don't even don't have offices. They have a nook in their bullpen in the basement. And they're part-time. And the reason I bring this up is because I think, as Chris and Marianne have shown today, our legislators are very approachable. And despite being maybe on the complete opposite side of an argument or position from you, you can still just walk up to them in the Capitol and have a conversation. And that accessibility to your elected officials is really important. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in getting involved in citizen advocacy to try to mentally get over that first hurdle of thinking that there's some great mystery to lobbying. I've found there really isn't. You just walk up and have a conversation and you say, hi, you know, I'm so-and-so, I'm a constituent of yours, and here's how I feel about this issue. You know, where are you on it? You know, would you vote in support of this? If you're not voting in support of it, why? You know, people, like I was asking in the chat, our legislators are incredibly busy. There's, you know, 150 of them, but they're getting pulled in 150 different directions pretty much all the time. So I've found just being direct and just walking up to them and having a conversation. And, you know, they all play the game. They know that's how it works. So that's kind of what they're expecting. At least that's been my experience. But Chris and Marianne, I would love to hear kind of your thoughts on that as well.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Just one other thing, and this is a pet peeve I have. Typically during session, we have more than 1,000 bills that we hear. Now that's probably not going to be the case this session, and I'm actually fine with that if we ourselves are able to limit our bills, not the powers that be. When you talk to a legislator, and the legislator is typically running and between committees and they have their head in one committee, and please, if you give the bill number, also say, oh, HB 193 for the carbon cost bill, because I'll spend half my time thinking, okay, what is that number? What bill is that? So that's also just a little tip.
I think it's the same set of rules that we use for ourselves. Marianne and I have been in the House, and when we stand on the House floor, that clock is ticking and you have to, you know, it's kind of like the joke that I think it's a joke where someone says, you know, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. It's this idea of distilling stuff down. It's getting that down to a Zen communication. That's where we need to be on the House floor. And I assume it's going to be the same in the Senate. Every 2 minutes, and Andrew, I'm sure, can speak to this. Every 2 minutes is a valuable, that's a phone call. That's a conversation with somebody. So, you know, we need to sort of really resonate on what it is that we're really trying to say. We're trying to keep it into a very short, sort of succinct commentary, because you can always circle back and then send an email letter later, or you can, but that first impression is really key. So keep it right to the point and don't, and I think the legislators will certainly appreciate, we look for the communications from you guys. That's what drives, and it gives us the sense that we're on a path here. And we can use that when we're standing to speak to give us some comfort and confidence that we're on a path here for you. And that, so, you know, it's very important that we have these conversations and then we stay in touch. That this is not just, wouldn't it be nice to be able to talk to a legislator? No, it's that the legislators, if they're honest, need that. That's what feeds us. And so, but it also, you'd just be blown away by the stack of emails that we'll get. And they're 10 paragraphs, 20 paragraphs long, and they're, you know, no, you know, give yourself a couple lines of copy, give yourselves a couple of bullet points. It's kind of like, you know, being in 8th grade all over again and the teacher saying, okay, tell me what you're going to say, then say it. That's it. You know, it's very simple stuff, but it can be very effective, and we really need it. Thank
And
you.
put the ask right at the top. Put the ask. What are you asking me?
Right.
And then,
yeah, it's all about business, because we don't have the time unless you're, you know, after hours, and then you can talk to somebody and have a more complete conversation. That's really appropriate. Yeah.
Let's see, what else? What else, Chris? What else, everybody?
Well, it's onward through the fog for me. I'm in California. I spent half the day yesterday on this platform watching the stream coming out of the state capitol building.
Oh,
Because to Mary Ann's point, we're learning stuff morning and afternoon, and next week there's a fairly big decision point about exactly whether we'll be wearing masks, for example. I mean, in California, you don't wear a mask. I think they haul you off to the local patty or something. I mean, we have to get, the Democrats are not ready to do business unless we're protected. And that's also for the staff, this wonderful staff, 200 or 300 people in the building who deserve to be protected. So, there's a lot yet to be figured out here.
Mhm.
and that's the other thing. You can have a say in what the decision is for what the session looks like, and also looks like, and how the bills are handled. By the next meeting for the Rules Committee is the 16th. I don't think, Chris, they have a time yet,
No,
but
I believe so.
there is, if you go on the Rules Committee website, which you can find by going on ledge.mt.gov, there is a place where you could submit public comment, and you can tell them what you think about doing a remote session or wearing a masks, or making sure that legislators themselves, if you're going to limit bills, that they get to select which bills, that the that one party or another doesn't get to pick and choose. I mean, you can submit information on what you're thinking, because we work for you.
Mhm.
I mean, some of them, I mean, the other party were standing in the Capitol on the House floor, unmasked, but they were standing there, and that's the people's house, and they represent the people. The people need to be heard.
Yeah. I just put up the streaming schedule. So on any day in February or tomorrow morning or whenever you want to, if you put that into your computer browser, it'll show you what's streaming on a given day. And then you can go, and some of them are video and some of them are just audio, but you can listen in and get a sense of who's doing what.
It's like today, this morning, the Finance Committee and the Audit Committees are meeting,
Yeah.
the newly appointed. So, yeah. Let me see, what else? Anything else?
Well, I just want to thank Arrow for, doing this. And I commend you for, keeping the conversations going. And I think we are all in the process right this second of trying to figure out how to stay in touch with you. And maybe there's other ways to, email chat rooms or other ways to do stuff. And if anybody has thoughts that way, I think it's a good time to be talking about how to stay in communication. I mean, we have the electronic platform. So, the question is, what would serve everybody without being burdensome? I think there's ways to stay in touch pretty efficiently.
Yeah.
So please go forth and have your voices heard, and tell your friends and neighbors and colleagues to also speak up and have their voices heard. It's our Montana that
Whether it happens in the next few months or not, and I know Andrew will absolutely agree, we are on a very exciting path. And the question is the utility with us? And if not, we're going to have to change some of the regulatory world that we live in so that we can bring some of these new ideas to bear. So we're not all sitting there with dial phones for the next 30 years. And, we will do that. This is going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen in the next 24 months. So, we'll do what we can. We're all in. But there are very exciting reasons to be excited.
Thank you all for carving out your busy schedule to take part in today's discussion and to engage in current events and your government, and it's so important.
Yeah.
Great.